Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneier. Joined as always my co-host Nick Filato. And Papa's got a brand new mic, baby, because here I am with my new mic sitting here as you can watch along on YouTube. Or if you're listening, hopefully the sound is noticeably different. I got a mic. I got a mixer. Me and Nick have been messing around with the mixer. My gain is where it's supposed to be. I'm thinking about other stuff and terms I've never heard. Nick will walk me through all that as we move forward. But for right now, it sounds like it's pretty good on Nick's end. So hopefully it'll sound good on your end. But I was very excited to get this mic up, Nick, because, we've heard constant complaints. I shouldn't say constant. We've heard like one complaint every 25 days or so about the sound coming from my end. So I want to turn that around to 0 complaints, 0 days. And I want to talk a little Giants football with you today, Nick, with my new mic. So I'm excited.
Mike sounds beautiful, Dan. Great to be over here podcasting with you. And you asked me about my family who came to visit me in Arizona. And there was one detail that I forgot to tell you about, Dan. And it was the main show that we watched while they were over here in Arizona. And of course, that was Curb Your Enthusiasm. So I was thinking about you all the time when we were going through Curb, because Dan and I watched so much Curb back in the day. So that is one show that I introduced to my younger brother, and he absolutely loved it.
What episodes did you guys watch?
We watched season 7.
Okay. That's a classic season. That's the Seinfeld season, right?
Yes.
Nice.
So I felt like it was a little bit relatable since my younger brother's a big Seinfeld fan.
That season, it might be the best season they have on a pound-for-pound basis, an episode-for-episode basis. It very well might be their best season, if I really had to break it all down.
And now I got carried into season 8, and I watched Palestinian Chicken, which I think is like the 3rd or 4th episode in season 8, and it's just such a classic, man.
It is probably the best episode ever, Palestinian Chicken. I have contenders. I think Ski Lift is up there. I think Trick or Treat is up there. I honestly think like the ugly section from one of the new seasons is straight up there. The episode where his friend kills himself because of the Jets. Like, this is an epically good episode because within that you also have how Larry and Sue is going to the same restaurant and they seat him in the ugly section, and then Susie makes it over to the pretty section, and Larry's just like devastated by this, like the fact that Susie's over there. He's like, one of his great lines in episode. He's like, I always suspected my whole life that it was ugly, but now I finally have proof. It's just such a great Larry David self-deprecation line. But let's talk a little Giants football here, Nick. I want to get a quick reaction from both of us on this kind of breaking, unfortunate news. It just feels like, sadly, this season, man, every time we get news, and this is despite the fact the Giants are 6-2, having the best season they've had in half decade, really, truly over a decade. When you consider that 2016 season, it was a good season, but it was like, the offense was so bad that year. But so many good things happening on the field, but off the field just feels like every time I get a news break, it's bad news. Today we get the news that Xavier McKinney on the bye week went to Cabo, spent some time on his vacation, went on an ATV, which, by the way, in his contract says you shouldn't do that, but went on an ATV and broke his hand because Rappaport actually reported after. He said it was going to be some kind of hand injury that will sideline him for a few weeks. Well, now we have the real news on it. Rappaport said it's a broken hand. The Giants have said as much as we think it's serious because they put him on the non-football injury list, but now he has to miss a minimum of 4 games. I thought a few games maybe meant like, he'll miss these 2 against Houston, against Jared Goff and Davis Mills. And I'm like, whatever. And then we'll come back at least for the Dak game, the big Thanksgiving game. But no, we're going to miss McKinney for the Dak game, and we're going to miss him for the Commanders game after that. Then hopefully he'll be able to come back after 4 weeks. I don't know. Hand issue seems like, at least at the very least, Nick, he'll be able to kind of like train his lower half and stay in football shape. You can run on the treadmill, things like that, with a broken hand. But I don't know, man. It just feels like at this point we're snake bitten by these injuries, but I'm almost at this point like expecting it. I wasn't even that shocked. I'm like, here's another injury for the Giants.
It's so unfortunate too. Xavier McKinney has this golden opportunity with Wink Martindale's defense as the wearer of the green dot. He's played every single defensive snap, all 506 defensive snaps, and now someone else is going to be forced into that position. I mean, it's unfortunate. I'm not somebody who's going to sit here and just rail on Xavier McKinney for trying to enjoy himself on his bye week, but this does seem to be something that would happen to the New York Giants, right? Like, and I hate that snake bitten type of attitude, but we're taking L's on the bye week, man. Losing Xavier McKinney is kind of a big deal because now you're going to have to force a lot of these other safeties into a more expanded role. And now I'm assuming Julian Love is going to become that green dot wearer. Has that been confirmed yet?
That has not been confirmed, but that is definitely the expectation and the speculation. We'll see there. I want to touch on a few things with regards to this. I want to start by touching on kind of just the hot button topic issue when it comes to this injury. Where are you at with, Kenny was a captain. Do you really blame him for this? Are you really frustrated with him for this. A lot of fans I've seen come out really talking a lot of smack to at McKinney, tagging him and things of that nature. Obviously, it's within his contract that he wasn't supposed to be on the ATVs, but it was the bye week. He was taking some time with himself, and all indications suggest that this was just a freak accident, and that, at least according to him, it was on a guided tour. So where are you at with this with Miss McKinney injury from just the player standpoint? Does this change at all your opinion on him as a leader, as a captain? Or even in some people have posed the question. I'm not going to suggest that you are one of them, and I kind of know your answer already. But does this change your long-term view on him at all?
No, it doesn't change my long-term view. And I feel like the way we look at this, it can be a little bit black and white. Like with Xavier McKinney, I don't know the intensity of this ATV ride. If this was him going up and down, jumping over things and then like just like crazy stuff, then yeah, I would say you need to have better judgment than that. But from what we collect from some comments so far through the media, it wasn't that. Ideally, you don't want your team captain to get injured during the bye week, but this could have literally just been, like you said, some sort of fluke type of injury. So I just don't have the details as to the extent of the ATV accident. I think it's unfortunate. I don't look down on Xavier McKinney as a leader right now, but I certainly wish that it didn't happen. But I just don't know the extent of how intense the ATV event happened to be for Xavier McKinney, if that makes sense.
That does make sense, and that's fair. I don't know, man. I can't blame an athlete for taking some time off during the bye week. It's a long, hard season, man, and you're putting your body on the line every game. I mean, you even mentioned just a few minutes ago, he's been their Iron Man. He is the Iron Man of this team. He hasn't missed a snap since week 3 of last season. So he wanted to spend some time in Cabo, relax, recharge, refocus. It's a mental hurt. It's a lot on you mentally and physically to play football, especially at his level, which means you're never off the field. You're wearing the green dot. So there's mentally taxing. It's physically taxing to the max there. And so I just feel like he got unlucky here with this. It sucks because it is the captain and you don't want to lose him. And we'll talk about what this means for the defense. But I just can't, as from a human standpoint, this is not, I don't get, like, to me, I'm a lot more frustrated from a human level with Kadarius Toney than I am with Xavier McKinney, just personally.
Yes.
From everything I've heard on the Toney front, it was mostly him being a bad locker room teammate, not committing to the culture, not committing and buying all in. That to me makes me more angry than some guy on his bye week just getting super, super unlucky with an ATV injury.
I 100% agree with that. And there's actually a part of the Kadarius Toney conversation that I've been just thinking about over the last week or so. A lot of people were saying that he was fudging the injury. Is that really true? Or could it? I just kind of think it's plausible that he was healthy and then Joe Schoen traded him at the week that he was going to be healthy, because Schoen even said he was going to practice that Thursday. And if that is the case, is he as bad of a guy as some Giant fans are kind of painting him to be?
Well, I think so. It's all speculation, Nick, but
yes,
I do think you're right that they traded him when he got healthy because that's when they knew he could pass the physical. And you're not going to be able to pull the trade off with Toney unless he can pass the physical. But as far as the second part of that is, I don't think that he was traded because he had a lot of injuries during his first 2 years with the Giants. I think he was traded because he didn't buy into the culture. And this is just speculation, but there's too much. And I got into a lot of fights on Twitter last week with some people who are just not, you can't speak bad about an athlete. I wish Toney the best. And I'm not wishing him ill will. I hope he does fine with the Chiefs. At this point, it's spilled milk to wish ill will on Kadarius Toney. Like, I'm not rooting for him to get hurt. I'm not rooting for him to be a bad player. No matter what, if he's good or bad, the Giants are not getting him back. And what they're getting is that late 3rd round compensatory pick and a random 6 dart throw. No matter what, that's the final thing. There's no trade back. So I don't care what he does now, but I'm going to say this. There's too much dot connecting for me, Nick. Like, if he was just injured for a little while, like, I know Joe Schoen and the Giants are smart enough on their staff to be like, well, this is bad luck. Injuries happen. They're part of the game, and we're not just going to rule him out as any type of weapon. But for me, it's like, well, do we think he can fit in this culture? Do we think he can fit in with this offensive system and what we're asking our receivers to do from a mental standpoint? All of those factors, mainly the teammate and the culture factor, are what stand out to me as why he was traded. So I don't know, it's tough to say on that front. But as far as McKinney goes, oh yeah, go ahead. Do you have something else on Toney?
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that you're wrong with your assessment of Kadarius Toney or anything like that. But I did see a kind of a prevailing narrative that he was healthy and he just wasn't practicing with the Giants. Like, I don't necessarily think that was true, even with the tweet that he sent. But I think everything you said is accurate. I think this guy didn't really fully buy into what Brian Dable was selling. He was a little bit entitled, saw David Sills running routes over him, and maybe was a little bit of a malcontent, just a little bit.
Yeah, no, I figured that. It's an interesting situation, dude. They dumped a first round talent who put obvious talent on tape. Like, I mean, the dude had a 100 whatever yard game in one game against the Cowboys, and then film wise, just traits wise, eye test wise, you saw the upside, and they just dumped him. In my mind, like some people have said the Giants got a steal there in that trade. Just count me out of that, man. I'm just not coming around to that one. I don't think you guys realize how late this third round pick is. It's a compensatory pick. This is not a valued asset in the NFL. It's fine they got something for a guy that they just ruled out, I guess, being a part of this team. But a sixth is nothing, and the third, like, you can get a sixth for anything. We gave up a sixth for Riley Dixon at one point. So I mean, the sixth is whatever, but it's fine to have another dart throw. I'm happy they got something, I guess, but it's not a steal. But let's get to the McKinney thing, Nick. Because I'll say this, the 4 games we're guaranteed to now miss McKinney are Davis Mills. Well, it starts with Davis Mills, Jared Goff, Dak Prescott, Thanksgiving, and then Taylor Heineke or Carson Wentz, probably Taylor Heineke. On paper, Dak's the only thing that scares you from that standpoint. But overall, I'm definitely concerned that in all 4 of these games, there are going to be moments where the opposing offensive coordinator takes advantage of the fact that Xavier McKinney is not on the field. And one thing that came to mind that I haven't seen mentioned yet that I want to start by asking you, and then we'll get into who's going to replace McKinney, how we see the snaps shaking out, things of that nature, which are all important topics that we want to cover on this. But first, just will this defense take a step back from it? Will there be issues with McKinney not on the field, no matter who's on the field, no matter who replaces him? And from that standpoint, Nick, where I'm really most concerned, just thinking back over the last few hours of film we've watched of the defense, it's in the run game. I'm even more concerned in the run game because I feel like there's been so many examples that I've seen on film that are back in my mind. They're just like traditional routine plays where McKinney's been that last line of defense, and he's actually filled in a lot of spots where maybe the linebackers made a mistake. Jaguars game comes to mind. One of those ETN red zone runs comes to mind. And, just countless examples of him kind of being in the right place at the right time to clean up other mistakes by those second level Giants defenders. And now you're going to rely on a rookie to do that, or maybe this Pinnock guy to do that, who doesn't have many snaps under his belt either, or maybe Jefferson off of IR. So I am a little bit more concerned about how this will be for our third level from a run defense standpoint, and then from also the underneath throw yak standpoint in the passing game.
And just from an overall standpoint, like you nailed it, Dan, all of those things, but Xavier McKinney blitzes. Xavier McKinney is up on the line of scrimmage, batting passes down. He literally does everything Wink Martindale asks him to do. And the safety is a very versatile position in Wink Martindale's system. Like, this is a big loss right here. Xavier McKinney, if you were to say, hey, who are the most important people on the New York Giants defense right now and who's playing the best, Xavier McKinney is in top 3 in that conversation more than likely. And now he is gone. And that's going to affect what Wink Martindale can do on the back end. That's going to affect what Wink Martindale can do from a blitzing standpoint, from a disguise standpoint, especially because Xavier McKinney is so damn good near the line of scrimmage and he disguises his blitzes so damn well. And he's very good with his timing. I really think this loss really sucks. And I think your point on the second level defenders and them just being out of position is a very astute one. It's a very good one because Xavier McKinney has masked a lot of mistakes from Tay Crowder and Jalen Smith, or maybe not even just the mistakes, but those linebackers weren't where they were supposed to be, which forced Xavier McKinney to be that alley defender and be that last line of defense, which in other defenses, you don't necessarily need that. Your linebackers are disciplined and they know where they need to be. So this is a huge step down for the Giants defense. Now, I don't think the Giants defense is just going to be, terrible now. I think they're going to have to really ask players like Dane Belton, Pinnock, and other players to step up. But again, quarter, that is their favorite defensive personnel grouping. And now you just lost your primary asset when you are in quarter coverage or quarter defensive personnel packages. Quarter, again, no linebackers on the field. You take Xavier McKinney off, are the Giants going to be comfortable running that against 11 personnel? I'm not 100% certain. I'm sure they still will if Wink Martindale really likes, if Tony Jefferson comes back or Landon Collins, what have you. But overall, man, this is a crappy thing to hear on a Monday coming out of a bye week.
And on the McKinney front, I think I've seen a lot of fans mention, like, has McKinney, because this is, I mean, box score wise, it hasn't been as good of a season for McKinney as it was last year, just from a pure box score standpoint, but he was in a different role. And I think he's actually played better in my mind on film this year. I don't want to say better. I think he's played as well because, like you said, the main thing that you said, which is why I think I could put him in that conversation, is he's wore a lot more hats this year. He had a game-winning tip against Aaron Rodgers that helped the Giants. He had other blitzes, sacks that helped the Giants, and just pressures that helped the Giants. He's done a lot of different things, saving tackles. I don't really agree with the Giants fans who have said he hasn't had that good of a year. This is not going to be that big of a loss. I actually think ultimately this loss could be even bigger than what the Giants missed with Leonard Williams for the weeks that he was out, just because I think that in some ways a safety, and now not if Leonard Williams plays like he did last week, right? Like Leonard Williams is an absolute animal. If he could do that every week, obviously that's a bigger loss because McKinney's not making that kind of impact. But as far as some of the other games where like teams chose to run away from Giants defensive line, like Jaguars, Cowboys, like, and then maybe he doesn't get that much pressure against Cigar. McKinney is every single play. He's playing a factor in it, right? Whether he's blitzing, whether he's just being in the right position in the box. Like you can look at it and be like, oh, Landon Collins can play the box role, right? Pinnock can play the deep half and they'll figure it out. I don't know if that really accounts for just like what actually happens on a football field. Like traits wise, you can look at it and be like, yeah, Landon Collins is big and can probably fail. Yeah, Pinnock has some range, but like as far as just the IQ, that's the thing that scares me the most. He knew this defense inside out. He was wearing that blue dot, whatever it is, for a reason. And now you have whatever green dot, and now you had to put some guy on the field who maybe doesn't know. Like if you use Pinnock or Collins, how long have they been here within this system? They might be out of position, and that key moment where they're out of position, a big play might hit that changes the game. And that's what scares me the most.
Well, think about this, Dan. He wore that green dot. So there's one Giants defender that gets to wear the green dot and is out there for every single snap because he is in communication with the defensive coordinator. And that's Xavier McKinney. And now he is gone. So now that entire process is changed up. And Julian Love, somebody who knows the system, somebody who is really smart, we trust him, he gets put into that position, presumably. He gets hurt. Then what happens? Then you're going to put Dane Belton into that position? Tony Jefferson, if he's back. I mean, like it's a trickle down effect right now to where this Giants secondary is going to be weaker because you have to force a player like Julian Love, who didn't have the burden of all that responsibility, now into that role because Julian Love was more free range. He did a lot of different things, and I feel like he's a very important player to this defense. But now he has to do the Xavier McKinney role, which is going to force everybody else to step up. And I get the whole, mantra, Dan, of, you take an injury, plug somebody else in and then you don't miss a step, but it's just not that way in reality. Right. This is going to affect the entire process of receiving plays and calling plays and people being in position, which could ultimately affect, create explosive plays for the opposing offense. Luckily, the Giants, and I'm knocking on wood saying this too, because I don't want to take the Texans and the Lions too lightly, but those teams aren't the teams that the Giants have played so far this season, like the Baltimore Ravens or teams like that. And I was going to say Green Bay Packers, but geez, what a nightmare. What a nightmare that team is. So the Giants are going to really, the Giants secondary really needs to rely on players like Dane Belton, who played 12 snaps, I think, against Seattle. Like he didn't play a lot against Seattle, man. So that's going to be an issue. And another reason why he didn't play a lot was because they didn't have as many defensive backs out there because there was so much 12-13 personnel run by Seattle.
And so that's what I want to get into right now, that last part. We're going to wrap up with this. I'm going to look at it right now as he'll miss these 4 games and he'll be back for the 5th game. That's where it's a projection, but that's what I'm hoping for. And we'll see what happens after that. He said a few games. That shouldn't be too many more than 4. So again, Davis Mills, then Jared Goff, then Dak Prescott, then Taylor Heineke. So you have Texans offense, which last week showed they want to use more heavier personnel, and they did. And you have the Lions offense, which uses more heavy personnel, but that may change now that Hawkinson's not a part of that. It's hard to see, but I still think that's undetermined. Cowboys, we already saw what happened against the Giants in the first game. It wasn't even a lot of heavy personnel. It was just a lot of using the receivers to kind of make an impact in the blocking game. And then finally, obviously, the Commanders, who have an interesting offense. Not a lot of heavy personnel there, though. That's probably the lighter side of the personnel. That's where you're going to need even more defensive backs. So how do you think the Giants will replace McKinney on a per snap basis? And who do you think has who will play the most in the McKinney absence? Who's going to and who's going to kind of step up, do you think?
I think Love gets forced into the green dot, and then I think it's going to be Dane Belton into a similar type of role that Julian Love had. I think it's mainly going to mean more Dane Belton. And then this is where it gets really interesting. Landon Collins, his role can expand. He played, 7 snaps in his second game with the Giants against Seattle. I think his role can expand. Tony Jefferson, is he going to come back off IR? I don't know if that's been announced yet or what. I think if Jefferson does come back, his understanding in Wink Martindale's system and his effectiveness, I mean, he was fine in the beginning of the season, will lead to more snaps from Tony Jefferson. And then you have Pinnock, who has been essentially just a special teams player up until this point. I like his athletic profile and his range and his size, but we haven't seen much of him on defense so far this season. I'm looking it up right now. Jason Pinnock has played one total snap on defense. Everything else has been on special teams. So can you really rely on him right now? Like, how long has the Giants had this news too? This just happened, right? So the Giants are now prepping for the Houston Texans. It's not like they had that bye week to kind of plan for this. They can go and bring people in and work them out if somebody maybe had some sort of familiarity with Wink Martindale's system. So I think I'm wondering if this is going to lead to more linebackers on the field too, if there's going to be less quarter, because the Giants might not trust all of the defensive backs to go out there and execute their assignments to their level. Can't say I'm 100% certain what's going to happen. Either way, it's going to be a downgrade, losing a top 3 player on this defense.
That's the last part is what intrigues me the most. Like, will we see some, because we haven't seen much of it, but will we see some examples of like where they got Crowder, Jalen Smith, and McFadden on the field for a snap, right? And they just have a more traditional base style defense look that just hasn't been synonymous with too much of what we've seen from Wink Martindale. I ultimately don't think that'll be the case. I think that'll be few and far between, if at all. But they could do some kind of hybrid version of that, right? Where you got Jalen Smith and Crowder, or Jalen Smith and McFadden. And then in addition to that, Landon Collins kind of operating as like a pseudo linebacker type defensive back, whatever you want to call him. And that's going to depend on what happens with Collins. But I think there's at least a good opportunity for him now that he's had the bye week to get accustomed with his defense and familiar with it. And that could be the key factor that we might pop open the snap counts Monday after the Giants game and be like, oh, wow, Landon Collins played this many snaps. And it might just be like, this is our best option. And I ultimately think ceiling wise, he is the highest ceiling. I like some of what Belton's done. Like, I like his baiting of the quarterbacks, but I think Belton is a little bit of a stretch as more of an asset to me, at least, than Collins, because I think Collins at least brings something definite to the table, and that's the ability to fill, like you were talking about before, fill the alley, play with physicality, clean up a lot of the mistakes of the second level guys. As far as Belton, you're hoping maybe he can play the deep half, but it's like, I don't personally feel like he has NFL level range for that, or at least not high end NFL level range for that. And I feel like that could lead to some issues for the Giants defense if he is asked to play a big role. So I would hope that
McKinney did a lot of too, right? Like the single high, like roaming the secondary whenever the Giants weren't in cover one.
Now? Is it
who
Pinnock? Is it Belton? Like,
that's
either.
That's a big question right there. Is it going to be Julian Love, who I feel like does a good job of man coverage on tight ends? I feel like he's also really effective around the line of scrimmage. I think the Landon Collins conversation is where it gets really interesting, Dan, because he might have been looking at an expanded role regardless of the fact that Xavier McKinney got healthy, just because he's only been here for 2 games, and then you have the bye week. He's just getting accustomed to this system, and now we might see him play a much larger complement of snaps, and he is really good in the alley. I think in coverage, you definitely have an advantage with Dane Belton out there, specifically because how he baits and how he just reads the patterns and knows where to be and how to bait quarterbacks. It's really precocious of him, how he's able to do that at such a young age. We saw him do that at Iowa, but in terms of run support, Landon Collins would be that type of guy. I think you're going to see an interesting rotation of those 3, Julian Love, Landon Collins, and Dane Belton. And then it just brings us to the Jason Pinnock conversation. I'm just not certain if the Giants want him out on defense. And I'm not saying that because I haven't liked what I've seen. It's just we haven't seen it quite yet. And if they have liked him on defense in the past, they probably would have found a way to get him on the football field, but they haven't, only for 1 snap.
Yeah, you're right. And ultimately, at least as far as safeties go, like we all, it's great to have the unicorn deep half safety like McKinney. And that, when it happens, when it works, like it did a bunch last year and he made interceptions or plays that are broken, make plays on the ball, it's obviously very flashy and it looks good. But to me, like the most important role might just be, and I don't know, it would be a good argument for me between like filling the alley, that type of role, versus just like the ability to match up against a big slot and a big tight end, or an athletic tight end on a key third down or a key red zone situation. And that's where I think this is the biggest loss, because if they are forced to use Julian Love in a different role that takes him away from that, then you have to put somebody else there. Landon Collins cannot do that. That's the worst person to put there. I don't think Jason Pinnock can probably do that well. And I don't really feel like that's Dane Belton's skill set either. To me, the safeties who can match up on the big slots and the tight ends the best by far are Love and McKinney. You've lost one now in McKinney, and now if you take Love and you use him in the old McKinney role, or you kind of use him more in the deep half at times and doing different things, you take him away from that matchup. That's what concerns me the most. The Giants are going to get crushed more on those key third downs and key red zone opportunities where they've been great as a defense. Is the whole reason why their defense is doing well. Like if you look at the actual numbers from the Giants this year, they're 28th in defensive DVOA. It's one of the worst teams in the NFL in defensive DVOA. Why have they not given up a lot of points? Because they get off the field on third down and because they force field goals in the red zone. And so that's what scares me the most, those I guess, red zone and third down matchups.
And on a lot of those matchups, where's Xavier McKinney? He's up on the line of scrimmage, right? There's like 8 guys on the line of scrimmage. Who's coming? Sometimes Xavier comes. Sometimes he just presses the tight end. Sometimes he sinks into his own, Sometimes he just mans up. Now you're forcing other players to execute that. Dane Belton in those situations, he's typically, when he is on the field for them, in the A gap. He's typically the guy who's sugaring the A gap. And a lot of the times he ends up coming, occupying the guard. Then Kayvon Thibodeau goes wide, and then someone else goes through the B gap, which is typically open or just isolated against a running back. Now you have Xavier McKinney, who's obviously not going to be there, and you're just going to really rearrange all of these safeties and have them do these different types of roles. I don't know all of the rules within Wink Martindale's system on how they adjust against certain fronts, against motion and all that. I'm sure the Giants are up to speed on it, but I mean, it sucks overall, man. It does, because the Giants, there could be more defensive mistakes, more miscommunications and things of that nature that could lead to, like I said earlier, explosive plays, or instead of a field goal in the red zone, it ends up being a touchdown, which, as we saw against Seattle, was something that the New York Giants couldn't overcome. When their offense wasn't scoring touchdowns and their defense wasn't holding Seattle to field goals, they end up losing the football game.
Yeah, exactly. All right, that's what we have today on the Xavier McKinney injury reaction. Keep it locked and loaded. Some more bye-week content coming your way. We'll be taking this debate into our own hands, and that's debate being who's been the Giants MVP through the first half of the season as they went 6-2. We'll debate that. We'll have some fun with that one. Talk a little, 30,000 foot football there, because there's some interesting conversations to be had there. We're also going to do some Giants midseason superlatives. We're going to Nick and I are going to give our picks on some of the best players from the Giants, and maybe some of the players we want to see more of in the second half. Maybe a few other things coming your way, but definitely be on the lookout for those things for sure. Keep it locked and loaded on the Big Blue Banter podcast. Mailbag should be coming as well soon. And I know a lot of people have been sending in questions, asking about that. We didn't do one last week. We'll definitely do one this week, most likely toward the end of the week. Preview the matchup for sure. We'll be looking into that. And let us know if you like the new mic. My new mic. I'm very excited about my new mic. I'm very excited about my mixer over here. It looks super cool. Again, I don't know what any of this stuff means, or what any of it does. But I will say, after you told me to adjust the gain, it does sound better already. So, look, Nick's an expert in his own right. So, anyway, that's it for the Big Blue Banter podcast. Have a great rest of your week. We'll talk to you soon.